Did you know that there is a frequency that's said to unlock secrets deep within the human mind, and the Egyptians knew about it? Come with me today as I explore the God frequency, the truth of the moon, and Atlantis found in Spain. The God frequency. Everyone's talking about the God frequency, but what exactly is it? It's believed to be an incredibly powerful frequency that resonates at approximately 963 hertz. This sound, according to many, possesses healing abilities. It supposedly resonates with the natural frequency of the universe itself. The frequency is currently being used by millions of people right now as a means for spiritual growth, meditation, and self-understanding. It also may have been used by the ancient Egyptians who constructed advanced temples to capture the holy frequency. The modern science on this is sketchy at best. There have been studies that show that specific frequencies can take away stress and boost concentration. Sound can even be used to produce certain hormones, but the spiritual nature of the 963 Hz frequency has yet to be indisputably proven to work. Still though, people use it to heal traumas. It can even be used to reach a state of enlightenment. The frequency can allegedly manifest desires and create mental clarity. Now, let me transport you back in time 3,500 years ago to the island of Malta. You're standing in a vast underground chamber and your ears are abuzz with noise. You and a group of your peers are in a prehistoric underground temple. The sound waves entering your consciousness are resonating at 111 Hz. This is a God frequency in its own right. The ancient temple, known today as the Hypogeum, was designed specifically to capture the sound within an underground echo chamber. Scientists believe that ancient civilizations have been working with one God frequency or another since the dawn of modern civilization, back when people were still trying to figure out how to shape iron. Even though they didn't have modern technology, they somehow understood the spiritual power of sound. People gathered in what's known as the Oracle Chamber of the Hypogeum in Malta to drown themselves in a 111 Hz frequency. But what did the frequency do? Researchers believe it affected the human brain in a similar way that the 963 Hz God frequency used by New Age practitioners affects their brains now. Scientists have done MRI scans that show the brain turns off its prefrontal cortex at 111 Hz. It allows a person to slip into a state of meditation and for them to be enveloped by feelings of divine peace. The Egyptians were likely doing this in their own temples thousands of years ago, along with the Greeks and the Chinese. While there are different frequencies, it seems that 111 and 963 have profound effects on the human psyche. Had you ever heard of this before, or have you ever had a sound bath? Let me know in the comments below. And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time. I want to give a big thank you to Dayzone and Margaret Slezak for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries or dinosaurs or mind-blowing theories. We've got it all. Total lunacy. Have you ever been feeling a little out of whack, maybe a little crazy or out of touch with your own reality? Then, have you looked up to the sky and realized that a full moon is glowing in the clouds? If so, you aren't the only one. Since ancient times, full moons have been associated with insane behavior. In fact, the word lunacy and lunatic come from the ancient Roman moon goddess, Luna. But does the moon really drive people crazy? Up until very recently, scientists believed that the moon was responsible for manipulating human behavior. In the 18th century, it was common for murderers on trial in England to ask for lighter sentences if they killed someone during a full moon. This was the origin of getting a lighter sentence on the grounds of lunacy. In the Bethlehem Hospital of London, which used to be a brutal mental hospital, orderlies took extreme measures during moon phases. At a full moon, patients would be shackled and beaten to prevent them from going crazy. In the modern world, scientists have discredited the moon as having any mental effect on a human being. But that hasn't stopped at least one person you know from blaming their mood on the moon. The Mayans believed in the moon's magic, and so do millions of people today. There are plenty of other outlandish theories about the moon, like that it's populated by aliens, In the 1820s, Bavarian astronomer Franz von Paula Gruithuisen claimed that he saw cities on the moon with his telescope. He called them lunarians. Franz was laughed at by other scientists, but there were some who shared his convictions. The most popular theory about the moon, other than it makes people insane, is that it controls fertility. In ancient mythologies around the world, the moon was almost always associated with a female deity. In Chinese myth, there was the goddess Chang'e, and in Inca mythology, the lunar deity was Mamaquilla. Scientists have dismissed this theory as utter nonsense, but people still believe it. In the 1950s, Dr. Eugene Jonas made a family planning method around his hypothesis that women are fertile during particular moon phases. He based his method on an astrological text from ancient Assyria. Hardly more than 70 years ago, doctors told their patients that they ovulated when the moon was in the same spot as when they were born. Weird pyramid theories. Modern Egyptologists will tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built in 2570 BC as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu. Scientists insist there is nothing otherworldly about any of the 3 pyramids at Giza, but that's incredibly boring. So let's take a look at some of the more exciting theories about what the main pyramid was used for. One is the theory that Noah from the Bible was behind the creation of the Great Pyramid. The theory was initially suggested by a British publisher named John Taylor in 1859. He'd never seen the pyramid for himself, but he'd studied its measurements. John looked at work compiled by French engineers who had been in Egypt with Napoleon Bonaparte. After much browsing, John concluded that the pyramid contains every mathematical truth there is. He called it a divine system of math. You've likely heard a few of John's theories before. John claimed that if you divide the pyramid's height into twice the length of its base, you reach an almost perfect approximation of pi. He claimed the pyramid was created using a system of measurement known as the pyramid inch, or the sacred cubit. And of course, he believed it was Noah, the builder of the ark, who was the holy architect of the monument. It's an exciting theory that was once called bordering on the ludicrous by the American Meteorological Society. But there are other bizarre theories about the Great Pyramid that are even weirder. Some believe it was constructed by the devil himself. Others think it's an alien beacon reaching out to the stars. And one of the most boring theories is that it wasn't a tomb at all, but a giant storage container for grain. In the late 1800s, Charles Piazzi Smith claimed that the pyramid's dimensions predicted the year in which the apocalypse would take place, 1881. This announcement led to a brief bit of panic, then nothing when 1881 was gone and the world was still here. Why do witches ride brooms? Have you ever wondered why witches ride broomsticks? Isn't it such a weird thing that powerful practitioners of magic cruise through the skies on a flying broom? The very real history of witches and broomsticks is pretty surprising. I'd like to start by saying that nobody really knows when the broom was invented, though it's safe to say that Stone Age people figured out how to use tiny sticks to sweep dust and ash out of their caves a very, very long time ago. The modern word broom comes from the plant known as broomcorn, which was used to make early brooms. Since the days of the New Testament, brooms have been primarily associated with women. Yet surprisingly, the first witch to confess to riding a broom was a man. His name was Guillaume Edelin, a priest who lived near Paris. After his arrest and torture in 1453, he admitted to flying through the skies on a broomstick. His was the first confession, but the idea was already around. The earliest illustration of witches riding broomsticks dates back to 2 years before his arrest. So, what's the theory here? The best guess historians have is that the connection between witches and brooms comes from ancient fertility rituals. Although Christianity was commonplace in the Middle Ages, there were still pockets of pagans. After all, pagan religions dominated Europe for thousands of years before the rise of Christianity. A popular ritual for pagans involved brooms, the full moon, and some firelight. Farmers would get together and dance with their legs on each side of poles, pitchforks, brooms, and other farming implements. They would do this bathed in the light of the full moon while the great pyre burned. To modern people, it would look like a satanic ritual. But for the pagans, it was a tradition meant to encourage their crops to grow. The broomstick dance likely became confused with witch covens around the 12th century AD. The Ordeal of Rice. In ancient India, it was believed that you could tell how guilty somebody was by forcing them to chew on grains of rice. This bizarre practice was known as the Ordeal of Rice. It sounds crazy, but the efficiency of the ordeal has been proven by modern science. At least, somewhat, that is. It worked like this. If somebody was accused of thievery, they were arrested. Then, to determine whether they were truly guilty, the suspect would be given rice grains. Grains of white rice, not any other type. A special judge would preside over the whole affair. The grains would be put into an earthen vessel, then the vessel was filled with water. It was left out for the night. The next day, the suspect would chew the rice and spit out the grains onto a leaf from a sacred fig tree. If there was blood on the grains, or if the defendant's gums were hurt, that meant they were guilty. But if there was no blood, they were released without charge. It seems ridiculous, right? Well, you'd be wrong. This technique has been used as recently as the 19th century. In Calcutta, the theft of a gold watch resulted in a man's servants being subjected to the Ordeal of Rice. Only it was a bit different. The Calcutta police worked with a local professor of magic who completed the ordeal using flour. The potential thieves were lined up and had rice flour poured into their open mouths. They had to chew the flour for 5 full minutes before spitting it out onto a piece of plantain leaf. All the suspects easily spat the flour out after 5 minutes, except for one servant by the name of Abdul. And sure enough, he was the guilty party. He admitted to the theft and faced the consequences of his actions. But how does this actually work to catch a thief? The theory is that it's all about nerves. Criminals who know they're in trouble become nervous, so their salivary glands stop working. They get dry mouths and can't moisten the flour. It was the same thing when using rice in ancient times, though they may not have fully understood the science behind it. Reincarnation. Do you believe in reincarnation? If not, you might by the end of this video. While some scientists dismiss the notion of coming back to life as something new after death, there are a few credible experts who say it's real. One professor claimed that the truth of reincarnation has been deliberately suppressed by people in power. You likely know what reincarnation is, but let me refresh your memory just in case. Reincarnation is the idea that upon a person's death, the soul or consciousness is transferred into a new body. It could be a human being, or it could be a grasshopper. You don't have much say over the matter. Dr. Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia School of Medicine dedicated almost his entire career to proving that reincarnation is real. He tragically died in 2007, but he made some great headway before his demise. Amazingly, he claimed to have found 3,000 examples of reincarnation throughout his years of studying. There was one very important aspect of reincarnation that Dr. Stevenson believed in. He thought that if a person received a wound when they died, let's say something like a gunshot wound to the stomach, they would be born with a birthmark in the same spot. He even conducted a whole study about this called Birthmarks and Birth Defects Corresponding to Wounds on Deceased Persons. In the study, Dr. Stevenson found a whopping 35% of young children who claimed to remember being in a previous life and had birthmarks or birth defects. The birthmarks could be attributed to wounds on someone who died at the same time the child was born. He claimed to have investigated 210 such cases. He found plenty of other examples as well. The doctor interviewed dozens of people who claimed that they could remember fragments of a past life. These were mostly kids, since the memory of having a past life fades very quickly with age. This may seem like proof, but it's actually anecdotal, so right now, reincarnation is still only a paranormal theory. What do you think? Atlantis in Spain? Theories of Atlantis are so commonplace that it's shocking. There are theories that Atlantis was really in Antarctica, but some say it was located in the Azores, Santorini, Morocco, you get it. Others believe Atlantis was in India. And there is even tenuous evidence that Atlantis was an epic city in the Sahara Desert 12,000 years ago. There are more theories than experts know what to do with, but a recent discovery could make these other theories obsolete. According to new research, Atlantis may have been in Spain. specifically off the coast of Cadiz. A team of divers and archaeologists just made a shocking discovery deep in the Gulf of Cadiz. They uncovered enormous structures that appeared to have once been artificial walls. What's even more amazing is that the ruins seem to match perfectly with the ancient description Plato gave of Atlantis over 2,000 years ago. The divers and technicians responsible for the discovery announced their findings at a conference in September of 2023. They refused to give the exact location of their find out of fear that amateur divers might corrupt the scene. But divers Boris Martinez Abad and Antonio Fernandez Olivero did give some awesome details. According to the divers, they found obvious walls with perfect right angles, structures rising from the seabed, and some buildings that stretched over 1,000 feet long. Michael Donnellan, an archaeologist involved in the research, said that the submerged site coincides perfectly with Plato's writing. It seems to be a city that once stood on an artificial island surrounded by concentric circle walls, just like what Plato said. Whatever these guys found beneath the water was also once big enough to have held at least 20,000 people, just like Atlantis. The divers did admit that they may have found natural formations, but forget about that. The far more interesting theory is that they may have found Atlantis, so stay tuned for future revelations. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The Lost City of the Kalahari. The Lost City of the Kalahari may or may not be a real place. For those who don't know, the Kalahari is an extremely dry desert located in Namibia, Africa. It was 1885 when the American explorer William Leonard Hunt traveled to the Kalahari with a small team and allegedly came across the ancient ruins of a mysterious and unknown city. Hunt claimed that the ruins belonged to an extinct civilization that once thrived in the desert. It's entirely possible, but the line between myth and reality is a little blurred. Over 130 years after the explorer allegedly discovered the city, it has still never been found again. At least 30 expeditions have gone into the Kalahari Desert in search of the city, and not a single stone has been uncovered. One of the issues is that Hunt never left behind any details as to the city's location. Also, he claimed that when he found it, it was already half buried under the sand. Later explorers may have walked right over the ruins and not even known they were there, because they were buried under a sea of red sand. Two recent expeditions went in 2013 and 2016 as part of the Marca Huasi project. They used Google Maps, aerial surveys, and radar, but they still couldn't find a trace of the lost city. Either it never existed in the first place, or it's been buried and won't be found again for another 1,000 years, making it one of the most mysterious legendary ruins in the world. The City of the Dead. The famed Egyptologist Salim Hassan discovered a series of mysterious underground tunnels beneath the surface of the Pyramid Plateau outside Cairo. This is where the Great Sphinx and the Pyramids of Giza are located. Within the underground tunnels were chambers and rooms with no obvious use. In fact, the history of the secret underground tunnels is still unknown. Nobody has any clue what they were used for thousands of years ago. And these tunnels are extensive too, going on for miles. They were allegedly mapped in 1978 by the archaeologist Dr. Jim Hurtak, who claimed there was once a great metropolis beneath what is today Giza that dates back 15,000 years. This theory has never been proven. The theory states that between the legs of the Great Sphinx was once a bronze door that could only be operated by the Egyptian Magi, though no trace of the door has ever been found. From this secret door, one could have entered the underground city, moving directly underneath the pyramids. These tunnels were supposedly cut out of the rock thousands of years before the Egyptians ever built the pyramids. Unfortunately, this has mostly been dismissed as a conspiracy theory at this point, especially since there is no known civilization that had tunnel building technology that long ago, that we know of. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The Queen of Sheba. There is no greater legend in Ethiopia than the Queen of Sheba. She has been described as an exotic and mysterious woman who held great power in the ancient world. She appears in the Old Testament, the Muslim Quran, and even the Hebrew Bible. The ruins of her palace can be found in the Ethiopian city of Aksum. The ruins of the Queen of Sheba's palace are said to be buried under the ruins of yet a different palace known as Dungor.
built around 600 AD by a prosperous Aksumite. But here comes the mystery. Some don't think the Queen of Sheba ever existed. They say her palace never stood anywhere and that she's more of a myth passed down through the generations. To the Ethiopians, the Queen of Sheba is the mother of their nation. She founded a dynasty that lasted 3,000 years until the last ruling descendant died in 1975. But it was from the queen's palace that the dynasty began in the year 1000 BC, when she packed up some gold and spices and made a journey to Jerusalem. The Queen of Sheba arrived in the holy city to test the wisdom of King Solomon. But Solomon seduced her, and she gave birth to Solomon's son, Menelik, who went on to become the very first king of the Solomonic dynasty. It was also Menelik who ventured back to Jerusalem and returned later to Ethiopia, supposedly with the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred artifact that's allegedly housed in a church just up the road from the abandoned palace. The Ark of the Covenant contains the 10 Commandments, but that is another relic that has reached legendary status. At the end of the day, there is no indisputable proof that the Queen of Sheba was real, or that the ruins buried in Ethiopia ever belonged to a legendary queen. The City of Troy. The story of the City of Troy is one of the most famous legends of all time, but it's also a real archaeological site. In Greek legend, Troy was a city besieged for 10 years before eventually being captured by the Greek army when they invaded at the behest of King Agamemnon. The Trojan War started when the Queen of Sparta, Helen, was abducted by Paris, the son of Troy's king. In the legends, the gods had quite a heavy role to play in the war. The hero Achilles makes his debut in the legend, as does the Trojan horse that ultimately allowed the Greeks to penetrate the impenetrable city and open its gates to their waiting warriors. All of this is immortalized in Homer's Iliad. Homer, the Greek poet, wrote his fable in the 8th century BC, several hundred years after the war had already ended. But just how much of all of this is true? The search for Troy went on for hundreds of years, but now we finally know that it was a real place. Archaeologists discovered it was located in northwest Turkey at the site of Hisarlik. The city was inhabited for about 4,000 years and went under several different names. Amazingly, a researcher from the University of Amsterdam says that there were at least 10 cities on this very spot. Each time one city fell, another was built over its bones. It's believed that Troy from the legend was formed sometime around 2550 BC. Excavations have revealed treasure from this time that archaeologists say may have belonged to Priam, the king of Troy in Homer's Iliad. But whether all the other characters in the legend are real is extremely hard to say. King Arthur's Castle. A retired professor from the United Kingdom named Peter Field believes that he has pinpointed the exact location of the legendary castle where King Arthur supposedly held his court of the Round Table. Dating to about 1400 years ago, the castle is known in the legends as Camelot, and Field says it was once a Roman fort called Camulodunum in West Yorkshire. What began as a Roman fort may have been converted into a castle for a king in the year 500 AD, when King Arthur may have existed. It actually works too, since the Roman fort was in a perfect place to defend Britain from any invading army. However, this theory is still just that, a theory. The problem is that even though stories of King Arthur have been around for over 1,000 years, no historian or archaeologist has ever been able to confirm that he existed. The Camelot that we know may just be legend, and may never have existed at all. The Garden of Eden. We're all familiar with the story of the Garden of Eden, what is referred to as paradise in the book of Genesis. The Garden of Eden is where Adam and Eve, the first man and woman on the planet, were given the job of guarding the tree of life, before Eve ate the apple and everything got really bad for humans. Archaeologist Jody Magnus believes she has found the physical location of the Garden of Eden. And no surprise, it has something to do with a church in Jerusalem. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is arguably the holiest church in the world. It was built in the exact spot where Jesus was said to have been crucified and resurrected. According to Jody, it's also the place where Adam was buried. However, the Garden of Eden may actually have been in Mesopotamia. Based on its description in the book of Genesis, the garden had 4 rivers flowing through it. The only place nearby that matches that description is in Iraq, suggesting that Adam moved out of the Garden of Eden in ancient Mesopotamia and made his way to Jerusalem, where he was buried. But unfortunately, no physical evidence of either theory has been found yet. Ramas Bridge. Up until the 15th century, the small island nation of Sri Lanka wasn't an island at all, but a peninsula. A small bridge of land connected Sri Lanka to India's Pamban Island. Today, this land bridge, known by several different names such as Adams Bridge and Ramas Bridge, is made up of around 100 small reefs and sandbanks. Believe it or not, the bridge got its name from the story behind the Garden of Eden because in Islamist tradition, it's often believed that Sri Lanka was the place where the first man fell to earth after he was expelled from Eden. A lot of stuff in Sri Lanka uses the name Adam, but this version of the story also says that Adam was a giant and stood over 90 feet tall, and he used the bridge to reach India. But there are other stranger legends surrounding this extinct strait. For Hindus, they believed the land bridge was made by a monkey army, specifically the god Rama's monkey companions. They engineered a floating bridge to reach the kingdom of Lanka, helping Rama to rescue Sita from Ravana, the demon king. In reality, it's just the natural geography of the area. The last town located on the land bridge was in India, the thriving port of Dhanushkodi, which was devastated by a storm in 1964 that killed at least 1,800 people and caused the survivors to abandon the region. The Oracle of Delphi. In 1400 BC, the most important shrine in all of classical Greece was at the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle's temple was built around a sacred spring, with Delphi itself being thought of as the center of the world. The Greeks believed that Zeus released 2 eagles that flew across the world and collided at the exact center of the planet. This was believed to be at Delphi. People flocked here from all over Greece to have their questions answered by the oracle in exchange for gold. The oracle was actually a priestess of Apollo named Pythia. She was so important to the Greeks that she determined when farmers planted their seeds, and even when the empire went to war. And yet she only ever gave cryptic answers, never yes or no. Researchers believe that this assured that she could never be wrong, because her answers were always up for interpretation. People could adapt her advice to their own situation and make decisions accordingly. The mysticism behind the Oracle of Delphi came to an end in the 4th century AD, when Rome became a Christian empire and banned prophesying. Since then, oracles have been a thing of the past. Whether they actually had the ability to look into the future is still up for debate, with most mainstream scientists claiming it was nothing but showmanship. However, it seems a bit extreme to simplify it so much, as these ancient oracles were often isolated and under the influence, perhaps understanding more of the ancient gods than they are given credit for. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The Lost City of Z. The Lost City of Z is another one of those weird places that may or may not exist. It was the British surveyor Percy Harrison Fawcett who coined the name, believing that a mighty city once existed in the deep jungles of Brazil, in the modern Mato Grosso state. This theory was based on available histories of South America, as well as Percy's own time exploring the Amazon River region. Percy discovered a mysterious document known as Manuscript 512 at the National Library of Brazil. This document was likely written by a Portuguese explorer who explained that in 1753, a strange ancient city was discovered with magnificent statues and even a temple covered in hieroglyphs unlike anything else in South America. But the exact location of the city was never given. So Percy ended up spending almost his entire life backpacking through the jungle in search of the ruins, which to this day have never been found. Unfortunately, Percy vanished into the jungle while searching for the lost city of Z and was never seen or heard from again. Some believe he found it, but the city was still occupied by its mysterious people, and they kept Percy there with them in secret. Others believe he was killed by native tribes or disease. Some even say the lost city of Z is still in the jungle, hidden from the modern world as if by magic. The Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was a mysterious structure reportedly tall enough to reach heaven. The story behind the tower is very strange. According to legend, the tower was built by a united race of human beings living in the land of Shinar after the great biblical flood. These people spoke a single language and worked together in harmony. This is how they were able to build the Tower of Babel so high. But alas, God didn't like it, and so he cursed them to speak many different languages and then scattered them across the world. Archaeologists believe that the Etemenanki, a type of pyramid called a ziggurat that was built by the Mesopotamians in Babylon, was the very real Tower of Babel. It didn't reach all the way beyond the clouds and into heaven, but it was likely the inspiration for the tower in this biblical story. They say the story of the tower came about after 586 BC, when King Nebuchadnezzar defeated Jerusalem and stole the local Jewish people and took them back to Babylon as hostages. Somewhere over the next 100 years or so, the towering ziggurat pyramid became a symbol of oppression to the Jewish hostages, later finding its way into the Bible as the Tower of Babel.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Number 10. Lamarckism. Lamarckism was one of the earliest theories of evolution and was first proposed by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck in 1809, hence the name. The difference between it and the commonly accepted theory put forward by Darwin is that Lamarck suggested animals could develop new traits within their lifetimes, as opposed to across a number of generations, and then pass them on. This was a process called the inheritance of acquired characteristics. This development, he said, happens because of the increased use of an organ or feature, and this could then be passed down to offspring. The most famous example of this is with the length of a giraffe's neck. He said that giraffes originally had short necks but had to stretch out to reach the leaves on trees. Throughout their lives, their necks would permanently extend, and this trait was then passed on to their newborn. A human example was proposed in the case of blacksmiths. They developed muscular arms from the hard work involving heavy hammers, and Lamarckism suggests that their children would either be born with strong arms or develop them in adulthood, even if they themselves had not used their arms very much. In the face of genetic evidence, Lamarckism was discredited in the scientific community by the 1930s, but some of the principles remained a focus of research in the Soviet Union well into the mid-20th century. Number 9. Anaximander's theory of evolution. Anaximander was a Greek philosopher who lived between 610 BC and 546 BC. If history had turned out differently, he could have been more famous than Aristotle. As well as being one of the first to create a philosophical view of the world, he believed that the inhabited parts of the planet were on a flat surface of a cylinder, and he created one of the first maps of the Black Sea. He also developed one of the first known theories of evolution, one that was quite similar to that of Darwin's. He believed that all living beings kept progressing and adapting. In his theory, life first originated from moisture in the sea in combination with warmth. By some adaptation to their environment, they then became the animals that they are today. He was certain that humans had developed from other animals. His belief was that when we are infants, we are far too vulnerable and reliant, so there would have been no other way for the first humans to survive if they didn't originate from another species that helped them get past that stage. There were some holes in his theory, like fish creatures beached themselves and then humans came out, but hey, it's not bad for 2,500 years ago. Number 8. Orthogenesis. While Darwin's theory of evolution shows that random mutations cause changes in animal physiology and those that are beneficial tend to remain across generations, orthogenesis, which is also called straight-line evolution, suggests that each successive generation of a species evolves in a single, definite direction. The underlying principle is that everything evolves towards a predetermined end result, and the idea of selection or survival of the fittest has no impact on this. There's no denying the fact that evolution often proceeds in an orthogenetic way, but this can lead to adaptations that have no actual benefit to the species and doesn't take into account changes that aren't successful. Because of its focus on a predetermined route to an ideal outcome, orthogenesis is often regarded as more of a theological concept than a scientific one. Number 7. Saltationism. Saltationism was a widely held belief of evolution before Darwin proposed his theory. While Darwin put forward the idea that species evolve gradually with mutations passing on through generations by natural selection, Saltationism is the idea that large mutations happen, which lead to big changes happening much quicker. The German geneticist Richard Goldschmidt wrote that the change from species to species was a complete change of the primary pattern or reaction system into a new one, which again could produce intraspecific variation by micromutation. This theory is seen as one way to answer the main perceived criticism of Darwin's, the apparent lack in the fossil record of some transitional stages of certain species. It's also known as the hopeful monsters hypothesis, because if true, it would lead to the emergence of brand new creatures in a relatively short time frame, which then have to establish themselves as a viable species. Research has, though, disproved this hypothesis, even though there are still some who believe it to be true. Number 6. Theistic Evolution. A major problem that some people have with Darwin's theory of evolution is that it implies that animals evolve in a random way, but this falls at odds with the idea that there is a god or a creator who surely would have designed perfect animals in the first place. This is where the idea of theistic evolution comes in, and it's a way to allow ideas of evolution and religion to work together. Proponents of this idea say that it was God who started the evolutionary process and continues to watch over and guide it. Despite evolution being described as a theory, it is a scientifically proven fact, but surprisingly, there are a large number of people who reject the idea. A recent study of 34 countries showed that the United States had a lower proportion of people believing in evolution than in Europe or Japan, and the only country with a lower acceptance was Turkey. Theistic evolution is an attempt to close this divide by making science and religion compatible, but still many atheists and creationists find it impossible to accept from their relative positions. Number 5. Vitalism. Vitalism is the idea in biology that living organisms are fundamentally different from non-living structures because they either contain a non-physical element or are overseen by a different set of rules. Often this is referred to as a vital spark or a soul, and there are some who believe it works hand in hand with evolution, with the belief that life goes through stages of actively wanting to evolve, as opposed to Darwin's theory that says evolution is continually happening randomly at essentially the same rate. An example of when this is supposed to have happened was in a period between 720 to 635 million years ago. From samples of volcanic rock, it's been found that temperatures were extremely low during this time, so it's called the Cryogenian Age, or the time of the snowball Earth. Following a large volcanic event, some researchers claim to have detected an increase in evolutionary changes, where life progressed from single-celled organisms to more complicated ones. The claim is that the increase in nutrients at the time allowed life to change quicker, with the implication being that it wanted to earlier but wasn't able to because it didn't have what it needed. Life wanting to evolve is at odds with modern understandings of the evolutionary process, so vitalism isn't a widely explored area. It also fails to explain why mutations occur that fail to improve a species, which in Darwin's theory simply means that an animal is less likely to procreate and pass on the mutation, but in vitalism would suggest the mutation has been actively sought after. Number 4. Structuralism. While Darwin's theory of evolution is functionalist, where organisms adapt to changing environments without a prearranged plan, structuralism is the idea that there are preordained frameworks in place that direct the changes that occur, in particular the effects of physical forces on development that in some cases supersede the idea of natural selection altogether. The reason why this theory has developed is that there are some structures in the natural world that appear to be governed in ways beyond simply trying to adapt perfectly to an environment. Some flowers, for example, are guided by mathematical principles, such as the golden ratio, and gravity has been shown to be instrumental in the ways that embryos develop. Early structuralism ideas suggested that as one organ becomes more developed, others become less developed because there's only a certain amount of material available. Later theories pointed out that parts of the body develop recognizable structures before natural selection adapts them for specific functions. Morphogenic fields are groups of cells that react in a specific way to chemical signals and can cause precise patterning, such as those seen on giant pufferfish, which means colorations like this may not be due to Darwinian evolution. Structuralism doesn't always contradict functionalism, and debates continue to this day about how much of an effect it actually has on development. Number 3. Catastrophism. We can see from the fossil record that throughout history, the number of animals and plant species on the planet has varied drastically. Many believe that this was due to natural ebbs and flows, but the theory of catastrophism has been put forward to help explain this and also to help understand its effect on evolution. The idea is that events have happened that cause mass changes on either a local or worldwide scale. Asteroid impact or unusually high volcanic activity are examples of these and have often been the cause of extinctions or reductions in population numbers. When these events happen, they leave an opening for other species to develop and take the hierarchical places of the ones that died out, which gives evolution a greater opportunity to take hold. The extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs, for example, marked the shift from when lizards ruled the earth to mammals taking over. Who knows if this would have happened without intervention? To a lesser extent, events like floods and tsunamis also have an effect on evolution because they can transport organisms to regions they've never been before. This allows them to adapt to their new environments and has an effect on the entire ecosystem, forcing others to adapt as well. While catastrophism has its roots in studying Noah's flood and events that have happened throughout history, they are now looking at the effect that human civilization is having and whether we are currently going through another major turning point for life on Earth. Number 2. The neutral theory of molecular evolution. First suggested in 1968, the neutral theory of molecular evolution says that at the molecular level, most genetic variances that occur in populations don't happen as a result of natural selection, but because of random genetic drift. A species of animal may, for example, contain various genetic codes that perform the same function in different ways, but none of these are necessarily better or worse at what they do. Instead of developing through natural selection, they are simply as a result of random genetic mutations with a neutral effect. In other words, they don't make things any better or worse, so remain to be passed through generations. This is why species can have different eye colors or fur colors, because the changes don't actually have an effect on their survivability. Number 1. The Stoned Ape Theory. Why do you think that humans have evolved to become seemingly more intelligent and able to communicate better than any other species? Is it random evolution, divine intervention, or, as was suggested in 1992, was it because our ancestors discovered psychedelic mushrooms on their journey? According to the Stoned Ape Theory, about 2 million years ago, Homo erectus, after they moved beyond Africa, discovered magic mushrooms, and psilocybin in them caused their brain's information processing capabilities to reorganize in a way that led to the development of early art and language. Thought to have been found growing in animal manure, the mushrooms allowed humans to eat their way to consciousness. Of course, very few in the scientific community believe this to truly be the case, so don't rush out to try and eat your way to the next state of consciousness, but it highlights the gaps in our knowledge on how human consciousness evolved in the way that it has, and why no other species has managed to do the same. Thanks for watching! Did you know there were so many theories of evolution? Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!